My first endurance race. 8 hours against 40 home-built race cars with fuel stops, driver changes, and unpredictable wheel-to-wheel combat. Oh, and you don't even need a racing license to do this.
Are you crazy? Are you out of your mind?
What could go wrong?
Are you okay?
So I've been invited to race in this track-prepped GT86 at Shannonville Motorsports Park in Canada, built by the guys at Apex V2R. Apex V2R standing for Virtual to Reality. As the name suggests, this team specializes in training top sim racers to make the jump into real-life race cars. And since I've only really driven formula cars, I'm, well, sort of starting from scratch here. So the sim is going to be a vital tool to bring me up to speed. Alright, so I'm just about packed, but I realized I was actually practicing on the wrong version of Shannonville yesterday, so unfortunately for me, this means I'm gonna have to actually resume this sim training session once I actually get to Canada, because my flight is in less than 2 hours, so there's no time to waste here. Adios. Well, I'm off. We are officially off to the races. Hey, how you doing? A bit late, but made it to the airport.
24 hours later.
Okay guys, so you joined me now in Ottawa. I'm actually at Mark's house, who runs Apex V2R. So this is his sim, and yeah, I'm just basically getting some laps in before we hit the track tomorrow. We're now into a 55.8, so beat Mark's record of a 56.0. So how do you feel about your record being smashed?
I hate you. Good job.
I think there's a few more in it as well.
Oh.
I can definitely extract more time out of it by just like pushing more in the banking and like utilizing more of the curves, which you probably wouldn't in real life, and going, you know, like there's plenty of sim time in there. So I don't want to get too greedy and not like practice for tomorrow. But
The most of it is the way the car drives, the way that the balance set and how your inputs do are close to it, and the fact that you're going that fast means you're not scrubbing too much speed, so you'll be flying in no time in your life.
Cool.
Just don't go faster than me in real life. I kid.
So done a few more laps now, brought the time down even more, 55.6 at the moment, but starting to get a little bit unrealistic with the technique. The track definitely has some issues. It's not laser scan, so there's a lot of undulations and stuff that won't be there in real life, and you could definitely abuse the tires maybe a bit more than you would in real life as well. So I don't want to get too distracted. I'm pretty happy with the time I've done now. There's just one section I really just cannot nail right, and I realize it's all because of vision. There's a switchback section. I'm trying to really hook it to the left, and while I'm doing that, I'm spending too much time looking to the left rather than looking to the next apex. It's really basic stuff, but for some reason, psychologically, I'm not looking to the right soon enough, and that's why I literally just keep missing the apex every single time. So shouldn't be an issue in the real car, but something to keep in mind in case I'm not quick through there tomorrow. Okay, so on that last lap, I know it was a little bit unrealistic in a few places, so I thought I'd take a look at the data and see if I could notice anything obvious. Now, first thing I noticed is actually these brake traces, right? Very peak, spiky brakes, very similar to a formula car, and actually very similar to a high downforce formula car, where you really have to peel off very quickly and stabby. But I think the reason why I'm doing that is because the car slows down very, very quickly, and I'm just basically using the brake more as a rotation rather than a deceleration, if anything. I don't know if that's gonna be realistic to the real car. I'm definitely triggering ABS, and the ABS isn't too bad apart from like the bumpy section here. So you can see I'm actually having to release the brake over the crest, then while the car is basically in the air under off the brakes, and then as soon as I land again, I have all this compression, and then I spike the brake even higher. Curious if that's going to be the same in real life as well. So I was feeling quite confident on the sim, so Mark and I decided to go get a few items checked off on his punch list for the weekend. The one thing we were missing was a set of brake pads for one of the cars, but there's a story with that one, but I'll save that for a little bit later. And then Mark insisted I needed to try Canadian poutine at this place in Ottawa, and this is my reaction. So, my first time, oh, that looks so good.
That's proper poutine right there.
That looks authentic. This might be scorching hot. Approved. Very much approved. But before hitting the road to Shannonville, it was time to meet some of the team and prep the cars for the weekend.
How's it going?
Hey, nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too?
This is 3D printed.
Ah, is this the new Aero stuff?
This is the new one. Front splitter didn't make it. There was a little problem with it.
Oh, that's cool. How did you design it? Like, was
A
there...
friend of mine, all CFD engineer.
Oh, sweet.
So that
So it's
will make
properly
200
done.
pounds of downforce at 160k an hour.
That's not bad.
Yeah, so it's kind of like NASCAR meets
Yeah.
like F1. So this is the second one. This is Shit Baru. There's a story there. This is called Shit Baru. This is with Swellio's car.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. This is OG because it was the original gangster.
Yeah.
That was Stance Boy. When we bought it, it had 7% camber on it with stretch wheels.
Now it has like
No
20% camber.
That's not original.
It's just the machine. That's stiff at the bottom. All right. The office for the weekend.
Yeah, so I can show you what you do when you get in the car. So obviously the kill switch is already on. Foot on the brake, start the car. Keys just normal. From this point, you see there's the traction off?
Yeah.
Yeah, press and hold it until, look at the dash. You see those two lights go off.
Okay.
That's it.
All right, that's easy enough. And basically, there's always just a little bit of traction still on.
Yes.
But it will be stability as well.
It's unintrusive. It's enough to save your ass time.
Now, there were plenty of goodies to gawk at around the shop, but we had a lot to do to get ready for the weekend, starting with filling the power steering fluid for the truck. So even though this championship has minimum pit stop time of 5 minutes, we wanted to double check that we could fuel with plenty of margin. So we did just that. Then, with both the cars loaded up into the trailer, it was time to hit the road to Shannonville. So suited and booted. Suit's feeling a little bit tight, not gonna lie. Well, it's been a year and a half since I've been in a car, actually. So take it easy, get back into the swing of things. Obviously, very different experience. Just doing a shakedown. It's wet, it's damp. Cars haven't been run yet this year. This is the first event of the year, so really looking forward to it. Like, so many new challenges with this car as well. We have stuff like TC and ABS, which I've never had before. Actually, I've had a little bit of TC before, but yeah, that should be fun. So I'm an idiot and forgot to record the first session on my GoPro, so let me just tell you what happened in free practice really quickly before we get into the really interesting bits. So essentially what I'm explaining here is that I was driving way under the limit and I was about 2 or 3 seconds off Mark's time because I don't want to crash first session. So now it's the second session, now I can crash. Alright, so a bit of drama. I think we just had some coolant leak out of one of the cars, the one with the new wing. I think Gauss' car is about to go out in, so hopefully not a major issue, but let's have a look. So while doing his practice session, one of my teammates, Nick, actually noticed that the temperatures were way too high, and thankfully he did, otherwise this engine could have blown. Luckily, they managed to source a new radiator very, very quickly, and they're going to have that in soon. So I think after it's shaken down and everything's working, I think I'm going to be heading into that car. Should get some new laps and hopefully some GoPro footage, since I was really stupid and didn't switch it on for the first run. So yeah, we'll get to show you a bit of the track. So the car with the 3D printed wing wasn't quite ready at this point, so I hopped back into the original car, which I was already comfortable with from the morning, and this time it was actually dry, so I could actually get a feeling for what this car could do. And also, since this was the first time everybody's driving in the dry, which is what we expect for Sunday's conditions, I'm also able to see what my competition's capable of as well. The car in front of me, the red 944, is actually going to be one of our toughest competitors tomorrow. And there are two main reasons why. For starters, they have 1 or maybe 2 hot shoe drivers in the car, meaning they're actually fast drivers who are experienced, and this car has double the amount of horsepower our car does. So it's going to be really, really tough to keep up with these guys. Oh, and I actually forgot another thing, which is that they have a fuel cell in the car, meaning they can do fewer pit stops in the race. But the advantage we have is we have 4 competitive drivers in the car, so we can actually potentially have a better average lap time over the course of 8 hours, assuming nothing goes wrong. So just talking about the track here a little bit, you'll notice that the tarmac here is very, very dark. This was all basically paved right before we got there, and apparently it's completely changed the characteristics of these corners. It's super understeery through there. Now you'll notice the tarmac's a lot lighter and you hear those rocks coming up. I mean, this section of the track literally feels like you're driving on gravel, and you can see how many patches there are here. The grip is constantly changing through here, and there's so many different lines you can take which offer you different levels of grip. And you'll notice after I go through this left-hander, I go into a very slow speed hairpin, which by the way is going to be a great overtaking opportunity tomorrow. And pretty much from this point on is the third form of tarmac surface, which I would say is the most predictable and the most grippy. But for sure on this track, you have to adjust your style corner by corner. Also, have a look here at how quick this 944 is down the straight. This is what we're up against tomorrow. Now, if you remember back from the sim laps I was doing earlier, this is the section of the track that was super, super bumpy, especially after this high-speed chicane. So basically, I'm going to go through this right and then this left, In the sim, these bumps may as well have been mountains, but the technique was actually quite similar. Notice that little bump. I'm doing that same technique with the brake shape to basically release and not trigger ABS. It's actually much harder than it looks. I'll talk a little bit more in detail about the track later, but have a look at that white BRZ in front of me. That's not another Apex car, that is another team running a BRZ, and it happens to have a lot of quick modifications and quick drivers, so you're going to want to keep your eyes on them in the race tomorrow. Alright, so just got some dry running in the car now. The behavior is totally different. Like, the car was pretty balanced in the wet conditions, but now that it's fully dry, man, this car is nice. Like, I can see why the GT86 platform has been so popular ever since it came out, for 10 years now, actually. The only other GT car really driven on track like this would be an MX-5, and this is definitely rivaling the MX-5 in terms of just how balanced and playful it is. So I think it's going to be a fun weekend. You can see the flags are definitely starting to get a little bit shaky there. So ideally, we're going to get some dry running in before that rain comes. Just a few more laps, just that way, that way everyone's really comfortable. But so far, everyone's been doing a great job. Vinicius was, I think he did a time only 2 or 3 seconds off my lap time I just did there. And this is his first time in a car on a track at all. So actually very, very impressive. So, how was your first run?
Crazy, man. Crazy.
Yeah.
It's insane. Like, not even close to sim, to be honest.
Oh, really?
Not even close, man. But it was amazing. It was amazing.
Well, congrats,
amazing
man.
Experience. I honestly, I didn't imagine that I would fear some turns, to be honest.
You thought it would just be like no fear, just normal like the
let's
sim?
just go, and that's okay. I know the limit of the car. No, when you see the grass coming, no.
Oh, it's out the window.
It's not that easy.
And speaking of it not being easy, this is Mark starting to push really, really hard because he knows a sub 2-minute lap time is possible. They've done it before in different track conditions, but it seems like with this new tarmac here in this section, the track is quite a bit slower than before, so he's pushing. But when you're pushing this hard, something's gotta give. And it just so happened to be in one of the fastest corners on the track. So looking back at this in slow motion, it seems like Mark just turned in a bit early. He dipped a wheel on the inside of that curb, which started the spin rotation. And then once he dipped a wheel in this rut on the left side of the exit curb, that's when it really started to accelerate, and he was just a passenger at that point. But he did exactly what he needed. He held the brake, and he prevented it from being anything more than just a spin. And as you should do whenever you have a spin, Mark comes into the pits to have me check over the car really quickly. I'm not sure if I knew exactly what I was looking for, but nothing looked too bad from where I was standing. So Mark decided to head back out and went for an absolute flyer.
Everything's good?
Everything looks good, yeah. As you may have been able to tell already, Mark is definitely one of those natural-born competitors, so when he made a mistake, all he wanted to do was send it back in the same corner he spun in. But not only that, he wanted to set a truly competitive time. So the lap you're about to watch is the new reference lap, which is going to set us up for Sunday. Like many other race team owners, Mark has been a long-time race car driver himself, but that's where the similarities end. Long before Mark ever stepped foot in a race car, he'd been sim racing, and this was way before the days of direct drives or VR. Back then, sim racers were the laughing stock of the racing community, so Mark really struggled to find the backing to make the jump into real cars. He did eventually get his big break to race in IMSA, but this was just before the financial crash of 2008, and so his sponsor pulled out at the last minute. That, however, did not stop Mark from becoming a driver, and he's even taken a step further by making it his life's mission to help sim racers transition to the real thing. The lap time trigger point was a little bit messed up on the GoPro here, but his best time officially is a 2-minute .8 up to this point. So now this is the reference I need to shoot for in my final practice session. So this is the first time I'm going to be driving the car with the new rear wing now that the radiator is completely fixed. In theory, other than the wings, these cars should be identical, but because I'm racing this car and because I know from my own experience that cars are never exactly the same, I want to make sure that I know this car well enough before we start the race tomorrow. So far, this car is feeling more neutral than the other one, and also the grip level is feeling higher, which, to be honest, I expected because the air temperatures come down significantly here. I've also noticed that the gear shifts are much smoother in this car, especially on upshifts. I was noticing with the other car, I was having to basically upshift maybe half a second to 0.7 of a second early just to compensate for the slowness of the gearbox, which I don't have to do in this car. But despite this car feeling like a rocket ship, especially in the slow technical corners where everything seems to just happen miraculously easily. My first 2 laps have been in the 204s and 205s, and that wasn't entirely traffic related either, so my mind's a little bit confused up to this point. But I'm going to try and send it for one final lap before we call it a day, and hopefully we'll have ourselves a 2-minute dead at least to rival Mark's lap time. Even though this car is much more neutral than the other one, you'll still notice that in this new tarmac section of the track, there still is understeer mid-corner, and I think there's just no avoiding it this weekend. The tarmac's just too new, and the oils haven't had a chance to release, and no groove has actually been built up in this surface, so it's totally normal. It's just really annoying. Especially when you consider this section right afterwards is completely oversteery, so it's basically impossible to set up these cars perfectly for every corner around this track. Now coming on the back straight where the virtual lap time trigger point is, I'm sure this is the fastest lap I've done of the day. It's just a matter of how close I am to Mark's time. But to my surprise, it's still 2 seconds off Mark's time, and I just have no idea where I could possibly find that. Sure, maybe I could be a little bit more committed in the high speed, and there's maybe a touch on the brakes in some of the bigger brake zones, but other than that, 2 seconds is massive. But when you're that far off and you don't know why you're slow, the only way to figure it out is to actually look through the numbers in the data, which we're going to be doing later today. All right, back in the hotel room now. Saturday went really well. We kept the car in one piece, or both cars in one piece, which is obviously the main thing. So right before we head to dinner, I think the last thing we're going to do is look through some onboards, look through some data, and rather than just kind of relying on my feeling on, you know, where I'm missing time, I'd like to actually look into the details and figure out what exactly I need to do tomorrow. I don't think it's complicated. It just, I need to materialize it and see it in numbers, which is it's always the easiest way for me to understand how to go quicker. So looking forward to actually seeing that in detail. So data analysis. This is probably one of the things that's most important and overlooked by sim racers. Especially in professional motorsports, this is where most of the time is spent throughout a race weekend. This is where the real discoveries are made, and this time was no different.
That's the high.
I arrived faster. I arrived at 162, which you arrived at 150.8.
Okay.
150.8.
Yeah.
12 kilometers slower.
Yeah.
Top speed. How's that possible?
What we discovered I have never seen in my entire racing career, and it totally changes how I'm going to drive in the race tomorrow. But you're going to have to wait for part 2, so make sure you're subscribed for that. Trust me when I say this was one of the most intense races I've ever had.